I think stability, and which is a weird thing to say given, what's going on around us.
We're pegged to the dollar, but we're not just a tax haven of sorts. We're kind of a safe haven in terms of geopolitical storms that are happening around the world.
Hello, team. I am Barney Crompton, and I am happy, excited to be here with a new addition to the Eden. Oh, and by the way, this is probably going to be the first Eden podcast. Eden is our real estate company. We are a small boutique, very high-end luxury real estate company. And I am joined by Ray Verma, our most recent acquisition, I guess you'd call him.
I like that.
I have to apologise because we should also have my business partner, one Mr. Fabrizio Saltini here. Unfortunately, he went out with the boys last night and he's not vibing off the notion of sitting in a podcast studio and answering questions, especially about what we're about to cover, which is the effect of the budget, the autumn budget, on the British economy and what that probably means to this beautiful country that we live in, the United Arab Emirates. Ray, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
So, Ray Verma, been in the market for a couple of years. Delighted to have recently joined Eden Realty, specialising penthouses, apartments. Prior to this, longish 11, 12-year career in finance, bit of investment banking, investment management, wealth management. So probably teed up quite nicely today to talk about all things
I'm going to be leaning on you very heavily.
Financial and politics, yeah, absolutely.
To put it a bit of context, Ray has been with us for 1 month now, and he's already boxed off two sales.
Yeah,
one in Dubai Hills and one in
the Royal Atlantis.
I
don't know. The deal's not transferred yet, so we've got to
positive PMA, baby, PMA. And he's also negotiating on another penthouse, which we're currently at 58 million.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Pretty close to closing. So that adds a bit of veracity to, one, the reason he's got a job with us, and two, why he is here today. So, Ray, I'm going to put my hands up and say I am ill-prepared in terms of numbers when it comes to the budget, but I know you are very prepared. So why don't you just give us a brief overview on what has happened in the UK with this budget?
So, very interesting. First Labour government for 14 years in the UK after a flurry of Tory prime ministers. UK budget was released 2 weeks ago, prior to when this podcast was filmed, not goes out. So really interesting tax implementation that the Chancellor has put in place as part of the budget. So headline figures to cover really is stamp duty is going up in the UK. So
by how much?
Well, by 2% for those buying a second home.
Okay.
So we'll come on to that, but obviously critical for investors in the UK property market.
And correct me if I'm wrong, they've also abolished first-time buyers stamp duty tax. There was a threshold if you bought your first property under £250,000, you didn't pay any stamp duty. That has now been abolished.
So they've halved it.
Okay.
To 125.
So he told you I was ill-prepared.
Yeah, they've rolled it back. And I hope I've got that right. Otherwise, I've been ill-prepared. So that's obviously really important from a property perspective. CGT rates have also gone up now in the UK, or will go up as part of
capital gains tax.
Yeah, capital gains tax. Sorry. So that'll affect basic rate taxpayers and higher rate taxpayers. The big headline one is what they've done to non-domiciled individuals in the UK. So before, non-dom individuals would just pay UK tax based on income generated in the UK. Now it's moving to a more residence-based scheme where global income is effectively brought into the UK taxation system for those individuals if they reside in the UK, which is probably going to be one of the bigger ones that affects our market. Really, really interesting. Then you've got kind of other non-obvious fringe taxes as well. So unused pension funds, they would previously be passed on to the beneficiary outside of anybody's estate, so it wouldn't be included in IHT. That's now brought into the estate.
So they're taxing pensions.
The taxing unused funds on pensions. So there's going to be a lot of old people having a lot of fun later in life thinking, I don't want to pay IHT on that. So let's go party. And then one that was really interesting, which I do think affects a lot of our clients, is they're implementing VAT onto private school fees.
Which is bonkers.
Crazy.
I mean, VAT is for goods bought and sold. So effectively, to be humanitarian about it, they're calling schools and teachers goods.
Absolutely.
Not a service, but a good.
Absolutely.
I mean, that really has high-reaching implementation or implications on the wealthy because, to send your two kids to a decent school in the UK, you're looking at £120,000.
Exactly.
To a decent school, not the best.
Yeah.
And now you're adding another 20% on top of that.
Yeah, yeah.
That suddenly makes the school fees that we pay here, even the most expensive school fees. I think if my memory is right, Swiss school, it's about 120,000 dirhams a year to send a kid to Swiss school, and no tax.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's one of the best schools in the city, in Dubai.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it seems like a good idea to get your kids educated here and cheaper and just as good quality education.
I think it's compounding. So, and I'll probably put this back onto you now because you've got 18 years worth of preparation to answer this question. But I mean, how do you think it will affect the wealthy in the UK? Because all of a sudden you've got, let's say per child, £20,000 more in terms of private school fees. Every property that you buy, you're paying 2% more on stamp duty. You might have a pension, you might not. I mean, for the ultra wealthy, pensions aren't as applicable, but there's 40% IHT there. There's just tax coming at you from all business asset disposal relief is going. So if you sell your business, how you're getting taxed from that perspective. Like, how do you think it's going to affect those wealthy British guys? And
depends on what bracket of wealth you're talking about, right? I mean, my brother and I were lucky enough to be sent to we call it public school, private school, in the UK. My mum was far from wealthy. She got not a government grant, but she got subsidies. But certainly, if her subsidies were to remain the same, but then whatever she paid to go up 20% to send my brother and I to public school, we would have been hooked out very quickly, right? But the super wealthy, they're going to bitch and moan about it. Quite understandably, all of a sudden, that's another £40,000 out of their income. But they could probably wear it. I think they'd be very upset about it. I think also, typically, the super wealthy don't really look at real estate as their primary asset class in terms of investment. They may have a few investment properties, but a lot of the time they view property to be quite illiquid. So if they do want to realize that cash quickly, it's going to take you 6 months in the UK to sell a house, take you 2 or 3 weeks to sell a house here. So I think from that perspective, it's going to upset them more than really make them decide to leave the country. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my viewpoint on it. But I feel like the taxation side of things is really going to be one of the major things that drives the nail into the coffin. And again, I think a lot of the reason why we see a lot of people leaving the UK, it's not really about the cost of living. It's about security, right? Security is the thing that plays a massive role in everyone's lives. But if you're super wealthy, you are super under the spotlight from, Joe Bloggs, who, wants your watch, wants to break into your house, wants your artwork, your art collection, and fraud and things like that. So, I mean, I think that is still going to be a massive issue. Now, obviously, there's been an increase in minimum wage, which obviously, will help the have-nots a lot more. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to call them the have-nots, but I've just done it. So there you go. Will help people, working a bit closer to the breadline. Will that reduce crime? Probably. You tend to find crime is a modality of people whose backs are against the wall. Most people are good. That's the way I think about things, and they don't want to turn to crime. Crime becomes something of a necessity. So if you can help people stay away from, bankruptcy and help people put bread on the table and food in the fridge, you should reduce crime, but you also need an operational police force. I don't see any more of this budget being spent on the police force. And therefore, I really don't see security in the UK being any more effective.
So it's probably fair to say definitely over the last 12 months, maybe a bit longer, demographic of individuals buying over here, families, a lot of it has been British. Would you say that's the primary driver of most people coming from the UK to Dubai specifically? It's security driven, or is there anything particularly unique about this place which you think attracts people here from the UK?
I think stability, and which is a weird thing to say given, what's going on around us. I think stability, I think the fact that, the governance of this city, of this country, is a lot more altruistic. It's utilitarian. It's the greatest good for the greatest number. Whereas I feel like in the UK, to get elected, it's the greatest good for the greatest voting number. Which is not necessarily in the benefit of the super wealthy, the super successful. A lot of the time they're the people who are overtaxed to help the up and coming classes. So I think, an opportunity for people to live securely, safely, and live in a city where they understand that they aren't going to be not unfairly treated, but they aren't going to be penalized to help support the rest of society, the populace.
It's interesting because I read that on the non-dom bit, 3 out of 10 people that earn over £5 million in the UK claimed non-dom status to obviously avoid or mitigate any potential
tax
taxation.
avoidance, not tax evasion.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Otherwise you go to prison.
So are those guys now just tipped over the edge? Because a lot of them probably have roots in other countries, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be a non-dom, there's, what is it, the 180 days. 180 days, which is if you have no property, no spouses, no ties to the UK, you're allowed to spend 180 days in the UK before you become tax liable. If you've got a house, it's 90 days. So these people who are non-domiciled can only spend 90 days in the UK because like as not, they've got a business in the UK, maybe a subsidiary business. They've probably got a house. They've probably got a kid or a family member that lives in the UK. So it's a tie. So you're only asking them to not come back for, a certain period of time and still maintain their non-domicile basis or their non-domicile position. So 90 days, yeah, fine. I mean, I can live in the UK for 90 days and go and spend 90 days in Portugal and 6 months in Dubai. I think a lot of the people that are going to be moving here are not going to be here during the summer. Where are they going to go in the summer? They're going to go back to the UK like everyone does.
That's interesting. I mean, one of the other taxes that we've not mentioned is employers now have to contribute more towards national insurance contributions of its employees as well.
Yeah, that could sink a lot of small businesses.
Yeah, and also how much have you seen a lot of British expats that have come over here actually move their businesses with them? Because obviously here we've got VAT, we've got corporation tax.
Yeah.
But is that transfer of their operations into somewhere like
I've
the UAE?
actually only seen one.
Yeah.
And he has a very successful shipping company and had 8 staff. And he offered the staff that he had the chance to move here. 5 of them came, 3 of them didn't. And he replaced the 3 when he got here. 5 of them came here and are enjoying themselves immensely. A couple of them have a British domiciled, but their businesses are abroad. So they still pay the tax in the UK, but their businesses are outside of the UK jurisdiction. And they come here because, as you say, now your offshore earnings are going to be considered taxable. So you'll see a lot more people who live in the UK, whose businesses are outside of the UK, coming here and just bringing themselves because they're not going to move their businesses, which is awesome. I mean, there's not a lot of manufacturing jobs here. There's not a lot of production in the UAE. It's changing, but what you want to be able to do is bring the guys who are making the money. Now, the concern with that is, should anything change in their home countries, in the UK, and all of a sudden, Labour are out next year and the Tories are back in, they could just go back home. You know, but you'd think 4 years of living in Dubai. I was here for a year and a half. I came here for a year and a half, and that was 16 years ago. You'll find that once Dubai or the UAE has its hooks in you, you realize that really there's nowhere else you want to live because life here is comfortable. You know, life here is good, especially if you're bringing a sizable bank balance with you. You realize that the affordability and the comfort levels and the security levels and all of the buzzwords that everybody uses make it a very difficult place to live.
That's quite interesting because it's my second time living here, having gone back in my early 20s. But do you think, having seen Dubai develop over all these years, do you think it's now a more sustainable living proposition for somebody to spend the rest of their life here?
Yeah, I mean, so when I first came here, value of property was
50
deemed.
years ago.
Yeah, shut up. Value of property was deemed how big it was, and everything was up and down the Sheikh Zayed Road. You know, Arabian ranches was considered to be the absolute boonies. No one wanted to go there. No one wanted to live there. You know, but now there's a lot more affordable opportunity or propositions further out. And if you're only going to be here for 6 months a year, you know, you can have a more affordable house that you visit for 6 months a year and then lock and leave, you know, with a nice garden and everything like that. So it's becoming location based. So you will find that there are options for almost any budget to just spend 6 months a year here. And you've got your investor visa as well off the back of that, 10 years. You've got your golden visa off the back of that, which is 10 years right to remain, multiple entry. So yeah, I mean, you know, Dubai has suddenly elevated itself into a place where it is attractive to many different pay grades. Interestingly, I heard, which may or may not matter to you, but you know, I've got property here, I've got property back in the UK, I have assets here, I have assets in the UK, and I found out that if you have been outside of the UK jurisdiction, non-domiciled, for 10 of the last 20 years, when it comes to death duty, none of your property or your assets outside of the UK are now deemed taxable. So you're only taxed your death duty on what you have in the UK. But it ain't ever that good.
No, never.
As soon as you go back to the UK, if you've lived in the UK, as in been domiciled, given up your non-domiciled status, as soon as you go back to the UK for 10 years, you're taxed again when you die.
So they get you straight away. Yeah.
It's an interesting prospect. Like, why would you do that? Is it because the UK don't want the elderly back in the UK? You know, you find you can stay, you can keep your assets, but you come back and become a burden on the NHS.
The state, yeah.
You know, and people, we now have to look after you. Fine, we're going to take a chunk of what you've got offshore.
Can you foresee a future where the UK mirrors the US taxation system, where it's just sort of like a global taxation on income, regardless of where you are, as long as you've got a US passport?
Never say never. Never say never. I do. It's just a land grab, isn't it? You know, when you look at a country that is, I'm going to pull a number out of my head, but I think it's like $1.5 trillion in debt. They got to get that money back somehow.
I know,
or they've at least got to get some more income to keep themselves afloat.
Yeah.
Right. The US is $3 trillion in debt, I think. You know, we are nearly half that, with a sizably or a marginally, a noticeably smaller population and landmass.
Yeah.
You know, we need to, the government are going to need to recoup that money. If you are clever, and I am fortunate enough to have an Irish grandfather, there is a little bit of Irish in me. So I am in the process of getting my Irish passport.
Yeah.
Because if that happens, you can have your passport back, Mr. Inland Revenue.
You need options,
I am now 100% Mick.
Yeah.
I mean, Irish. Yeah. I mean, I see it happening. I see it happening. And if you're clever, you will, and you have the opportunity, you need another passport. You get an Indian passport, right?
I can get an Indian one, or you can marry and potentially get a passport that way.
Yeah, no, Fabrizio's wife tried that, but she married him because she loves him, not that she wants a Brazilian passport.
He's not here to defend himself.
So. Cheap shots everywhere. But she has to get a Brazilian passport, she has to take a naturalization test.
Okay.
So basically she has to be able to speak Portuguese.
Interesting.
Brazilian Portuguese.
Yeah.
And they have to have been married for a certain period of time. So in the UK, so my sister-in-law is South African. She has to have lived in the UK for 3 years to qualify for a British passport.
And then I think they give you that test where they ask you questions about Coronation Street and random stuff like that, don't they?
I'd fail that. I don't watch that garbage. Jesus. And does Coronation Street or EastEnders make you more English? I really don't think it should.
Definitely doesn't make me more proud to be English or British, should I say? Yeah,
you can say English, mate. It's fine.
Yeah. So,
what do you feel? Well, I mean, you obviously have a more intimate knowledge of the way these things work than I do. What's your viewpoint?
My viewpoint is quite pragmatic in the sense that I think that everything does have cycles. And
4 years, this one.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I do think the UK in general is just at a point in its cycle where it is in the process of regrouping, get everything back together, reassess exactly what needs to be done. But then it does also worry me that billions, trillions of pounds are just printed by the central bank. At this point, it's just monopoly money.
Buy gold.
Yeah,
buy assets.
This is not financial advice.
Yes, it is. Do exactly what I tell you, but just don't come crying to me when it goes horribly wrong.
The healthcare system is really in a bad situation, as is the policing system.
Should they be privatising the NHS?
No comment. Yes.
So interestingly, I've just spent a week on a Caribbean island, of which I'm not allowed to discuss because I went to somebody's birthday party and I'm not allowed to tell you who they are. Yada yada yada. But anyway, I was speaking to a chap there who his brother was an economist, is an economist, and he figured out, and this is hearsay, but it's quite an astonishing number, the level of bureaucracy in the NHS and pen pushers and red tape that you have to go through. Have a guess how much a single pen, and this is 10 years ago, how much a single pencil cost the NHS.
Fucking hell. Can I swear?
Yeah, you fucking can.
I don't know how much
You'll swear after you hear this number.
I don't know how much an actual pencil costs. I'm going to say
11p, I reckon.
Yeah, I'm going to say
maybe 20p.
I don't know. Economies of scale, 7p.
£10.
What?
Yeah, you can swear now.
Wow, fuck me.
£10.
Why?
You could just get your secretary to go over the road and buy from WH Smith's, if they're still open, WH Smith's a bag of pencils for 2-3 quid.
But are these just horrendous contracts the NHS has got?
Horrendous contracts, and just the amount of people that have to rubber stamp all of this shit that goes along with it.
Wow.
That's how badly mismanaged the NHS is. It's a black hole of the British taxpayers' money. And that's why it made me really interested. It was really interesting to see that Elon Musk has been put in charge of basically shedding dead weight in the US government. We need one of those.
Yeah.
Like
Somebody
we need a guy who's
in.
just going to come along and go, you're fired. Oh, Alan Sugar, you're fired. You're fired. You're fired. Like streamline everything.
Yeah.
If you can bring, I don't know how many billions, and they allocated 22 billion pounds to the NHS over the next 4 years. And that they allocated 34, but initially they're only going to use 22.
Well, because it's all
and
going
that's
on pencils.
on top of the billions it's already spending.
Yeah.
And nobody can get a doctor's appointment.
Unbelievable.
I mean, 3 months. Who was it? My wife was. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff going on here. My wife was telling me about somebody who went to the doctors and we were skiing with her. She'd done her ACL. By done, I mean like ruptured it skiing. And she went to the doctors and the doctor said, yep, you've ruptured your ACL. You're going to need surgery. To get an appointment to see a doctor to confirm that and get the x-rays and stuff, 3 months.
Wow.
3 months for somebody who can't walk.
Yeah. Unbelievable amount of damage being done to
I
that.
mean, my dad came and visited. I shouldn't laugh, but it was quite funny when it happened. My dad came to visit us at Christmas. He fell over, bumped his head. There was a bit of blood, not a lot, but when somebody that you love falls over, it's always funny. And we took him to the doctors here to Park View Hospital and sat down in A&E, and 5 minutes, and I'm not kidding, 5 minutes later, the doctor came out and saw my dad.
Yeah.
if that happens in the UK, in the NHS, which is sinking billions and billions and billions of pounds a year, and has just had another 22, it's a 12-hour wait.
Yeah.
Because he's not deemed an emergency.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I had to renew my visa recently when I joined you guys. And for anybody who's not familiar with the UAE healthcare system, I drove up to the hospital. The car was valet parked. I went in.
Oh, you fancy.
A robot served me water. I then went straight into my blood test, had an x-ray. The whole thing was done in 8 minutes. 8 minutes. And I hate needles, and I didn't even feel these needles. So I don't know whether the UAE is using some special kind of needle either. Yeah. But unbelievable, staggering. I wonder how culturally the UK deals with privatising the NHS, because most, if not everybody,
that and the post office are the last great institutions, aren't they?
I don't think a lot of people could get their head around a privatised healthcare system, which is ironic because when you create a free market, more competition, cost ultimately is a race to the bottom, isn't it?
Then you have to pay insurance, and then obviously you have that issue that the US has, where there's people who can't afford their own insurance.
Yeah,
and these are people that are just. They get emergency treatment in the US, and then you're wheeled out onto the street and just left.
That's not great either, is it? That's not great either.
I mean, what's the 12-hour wait for a bump on the head or just being wheeled outside?
Yeah, left to your own devices. Yeah.
And I want that wheelchair back.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a slippery slope. I mean, I think. And this was never supposed to be about the NHS, this whole podcast. But I think if you were going to do something, you would want Elon Musk type person to come in and reform it.
Yeah.
Reform it drastically, because it is so mismanaged. It's a crying shame.
So to bring it back on topic.
No, I like this topic. Let's stick to this.
Let's say John or Amanda.
Hug and Kiss.
In the UK is watching this, has never considered living in Dubai before, has generated or amassed a certain level of wealth, not crazy amounts, but enough to consider their options. Why would that person decide on Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Ras Al Khaimah, depending on how you feel about anything, as opposed to Monaco, as opposed to Singapore, as opposed to Johannesburg, as opposed to,
Because I don't want to die.
Yeah, well,
Johannesburg,
probably.
So, okay, well, I mean, your first one, Monaco. So, again, one of my clients was telling me the other day how much a parking space, a parking space in Monaco costs. Have a guess how much a parking space in Monaco costs.
100,000 euros.
1.3 million euros. Dude, your numbers are way out. Get with the program.
I've never been rich enough to look at a parking space in Monaco.
1.3 million euros for a parking space. Now think, what's 1.3 million euros in dirhams? Call it 4 million dirhams. What can you buy with 4 million dirhams? You can buy a nice 2-bedroom apartment.
True.
Right? Nice 3-bedroom apartment in Dubai Hills. Like, I probably got that wrong, but do you see what I mean? So in terms of standard of living, you ain't ever going to choose Monaco. No one's rich enough to live in Monaco anymore. Johannesburg, I mean, you're leaving England because of security. You're out of the frying pan and into the fire. Although I have to say, right, and I have to go on record, I was recently seconded by a client of mine to the Big Smoke, to Blighty, to London, to look for a hotel. He wanted to buy a hotel. And the hotel had to be close to Harrods. Basically, I won't go bore you with the details. But so I'm walking around Harrods, Mayfair, Belgravia, Chelsea, very affluent areas of London. The exact kind of places you would imagine these little gimps on mopeds are going to be coming along trying to steal your phone. And I have to admit, until I got my bearings, I was the tourist guy with his Google Maps open going, I do not remember my way around this place. Not once did I feel unsafe. Not once. I didn't see a carjacking. I didn't see, someone getting mugged. I wasn't out late at night or anything, but, and I spoke to a cab driver and he said the same thing. He's like, I've been a cabbie for, 40 years. I've only ever seen 2 carjackings. Like, well, 2's quite a lot, to be honest. I haven't seen any. But,
2 more than you get in Dubai.
But, point being, I think there is a lot of misinformation spread about how dangerous London is or can be. But I think, in terms of the percentages, London is a far more dangerous place than Dubai. And I bring this back, right? And I bring this whole conversation back to something that it's a hill I am prepared to die on when I say, if you've worked your life to become a successful, wealthy individual who wants to drive the cars, who wants to have the apartment, who wants to wear the watches, to wear his Loro Piana loafers without worrying, one, about the rain, two, that you're going to get mugged for your shoes. You deserve the right to be able to have the trappings of your success. And unfortunately, in lots and lots of cities, you can't do that. In Dubai, it's positively applauded. People wear their Pateks out. Where's your Patek? You're not wearing it today. People are not afraid to wear the trappings of their success. They peacock here. Sometimes there's a bit of keeping up with the Joneses. I've got the new Birkin. Can't even pick a Birkin out of the lineup, but I know they're expensive bags. But people can afford the life. People can appreciate and have the lifestyles that they have worked to afford. And I don't think there's many other cities in the world that you can do that, especially at globally still pretty affordable prices.
So I'll ask you something that's probably a bit more personal to you then, rather than me. You've got kids.
I do.
Do you think it's too mollycoddled here as a society for a child to grow up? Do you think
that comes from the parents? All of that comes from the parents. I see 7-year-old kids in the mall in pushchairs. Like, unless there's something wrong with you, you need to get up out of that pushchair.
Get the fuck up and walk.
Fatty, and walk. Yeah. That sounded really bad. No, I mean, I think hardship comes from it. Right. No, when I was 7, 8, I had a jobs list. I had a chores list. We don't call them chores at home. We call them, a jobs list. Set the table, clear the table, do the washing up, dust the house once a week, hoover the house twice a week, all of that stuff, do the ironing, hang the laundry, all of that stuff. That comes from the parents. Now, the issue that you've got is that here you have staff. We have a nanny who looks after our house and takes our kids to school when we can't and picks them up when we can't. She does the laundry, but my kids set the table, clear the table, load the dishwasher, empty the dishwasher. They're made to understand that you have to be a productive member of society. The second you let your kids get looked after by someone else and not have any idea of the way life works, yeah, sure, you're letting them down. You're mollycoddling them, and they will struggle when the day comes when they leave home and they have no idea how to make a boiled egg.
But I mean, playing devil's advocate, so, I mean, I wasn't from the worst area in the world in the UK, not the best area either.
Where was it?
Nottingham.
Nottingham.
Used to be called Shottingham back in the day.
Used to be the knife crime capital of England, wasn't it? Nottingham?
After it became the gun capital
After you left.
Of the UK. Yeah, absolutely. How do you, if you're an individual moving over here with your family, you've maybe got young kids, how do you bake in that streetwise element to raising a child? Because yes, you can have jobs at home, chores at home, whatever
Attack
it may
them
be.
when they're not suspecting it. See how they handle it.
Start and build your way up from a pillow fight. How do you, say if you've got a daughter and you're raising your kids in Dubai, you've got a daughter, she gets to 18, she says, Dad, I want to go to uni in London. I want to go and study there, one of the best institutions, let's say UCL. How do you, as a dad, prepare your daughter for the fact that it's a completely different way of living? You have to look over your shoulder.
You do. And that's what you tell them. Be careful.
Get on the
Look
neck
out for these
exercises.
things. Make sure, a lot of this comes down to, right, there are more specific and more medical terminologies to this, but there is a reason why you have a gut feeling. You know that feeling you get when someone's watching you and you turn around and you're like, there's someone there.
Yeah.
That's
Eyes
your
on you.
gut feeling, right? That's your primeval brain telling you there's something wrong. And you have to tell your kids to listen to that, right? But a lot of the time, it's a suck it and see situation, right? You're going to go to London, you leave your phone on the table, it will get nicked. She leaves her phone on the table in the first week, guess what? It got nicked.
Really?
Okay, right. I'm not my kid.
All right.
She's 9.
All right.
She leaves her shit everywhere.
I was gonna say.
She leaves her stuff everywhere. but point being is you have to be able to let your kids make their own mistakes, right? And you can tell them. My dad used to say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can tell it what it needs to do. You can tell your kids to be careful, but ultimately they will make their own mistakes. And if you're worried about your kids making mistakes, then you're not going to let them ever grow up, right? You know, I remember when my brother and I went traveling when we were 19, backpacking. We went to India. Kids from Oxford, never seen poverty like that. We went to Thailand, never seen crime like that. The little gangs that wander around and, you put your stuff on the table and they bring out a tourist map and they put it down on top of your stuff on your table and one of them hand is under there. Like, you just have to put your kids in these situations and hope they survive. And there will be times where stuff goes wrong.
Dad, what's a lady boy?
Just it's gone horribly wrong. Look, in terms of that, in terms of parenting, you just have to be prepared that stuff in your kids' lives will go wrong, terribly wrong, but you have to let them feel it, live it. One of the greatest things my mum ever did for me was let me make my own mistakes, and my dad, go out into the world. I'll be here if anything really bad happens, but after that, you're on your own. And then you learn to do your own washing up, do your own laundry, not walk down certain streets late at night. This has definitely taken a massive, sideways turn.
It's a cultural podcast
the
today.
economy, isn't it? How great is England? It's crap. Come to Dubai.
So in summary, then, in relation to kind of where we first started, to bring it back, so all these tax implementations being introduced by the Labour government as part of the budget, a lot of kind of mass affluent, let's say, upwards towards your high net worth, are going to be considering what their future looks like in the UK. Dubai.
If I can interject. So I was in London. I spent some time with a guy called Pete Bevan, who head of sales for Savills in London. And after the budget, I called him. I said, so, what happened? How's it been? How's it been received? And he said, I'm not sure if I'm going to get him in trouble. Maybe he's not even watching
Just do it
this.
anyway.
Forget I said that name, Pete Bevan. Don't worry about it. He said the demographic of 10 to 15 million is going to suffer. The really expensive stuff, this budget doesn't mean anything to these guys because they've probably figured out, the tax situation already. So all of this stuff doesn't really matter. And then, but it's the 10 to 15 million pound range that is going to struggle. And that's probably, and he didn't tell me this is just by extrapolation, it's probably because they're the very wealthy SME owners, right? These are guys who have got, a couple of hundred staff, maybe a couple of thousand staff, and they've got businesses inside the UK. They're the ones who are going to have to be forking out more national insurance, higher tax rate, all of these things, which is bonkers if you think about it, because SME, small to middle enterprises, make up for 60% of the British economy. And they're the ones who've just been whacked on the head by the government. All of the really wealthy guys have got away with this relatively unscathed.
It's so true.
And all the guys who make up 60% of the economy in the UK have just been whacked on the head with more tax.
Yeah. So we're saying...
And higher school fees.
Well, yeah, that was my next point. So we're saying Dubai is a real viable option for these guys.
But then what do you do with your business? Your business is still in the UK, and the UK is still going to tax you unless you commit to only going back to the UK 90 days a year, which is fine, right? 90 days a year is the best 3 months of summer out there.
Hyde Park, picnic, all of that stuff. Yeah.
I mean, if I had a small to medium enterprise in the UK and I could leave and save the tax, no. That's only personal tax, 90 days. Your corporation tax is still going to be the same. So you're in many respects a bit hamstrung. But I'm sure, look, these people are incredibly intelligent. They didn't suddenly become able to afford a house for 10 to 15 million quid. There will be workarounds where these guys can manufacture tax situations, beneficial tax situations. And in terms of their own income, if they're being paid dividends and things like that, there's a whole different tax bracket. But where they can remove themselves from a government that just doesn't seem to want them. And that's the sad thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that they don't want them. It's that they want an unfair slice of what they have.
Yeah.
But again, it all comes down to the money that has been borrowed before.
100%. It's the mess that ensued prior. I was looking a little bit deeper into this actually. So of the budget, a lot of the tax implementation is coming later, kind of in later years. So sort of 27, 28. A lot of the government spending is front end loaded. So the anticipation is that all that government spending is going to create a bit of an inflation problem in the UK, which means that interest rates are not going to come down as quickly as previously anticipated.
Okay.
So you've also got an environment where stamp duty is being increased on your second home. If you want to buy to let property, you want to buy an investment property, it's also going to cost a shitload more than you anticipated because rates are probably going to still stay at a certain level.
Capital gains has gone up, so when you sell it, your profit gets sucked out.
When you dispose of the asset, you're getting shafted on CGT. If by hook or crook something happens to you, it's all captured within your estate, so you're going to pay IHT on it as well. So somewhere like Dubai becomes a very tangible prospect, even for somebody maybe not moving here full time, but that wants to have a look at an investment property, right?
That was a shameless plug.
It was, but
that's why we're here at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We want people to know what to make it look like we know what we're talking about,
exactly.
so that
it does make sense.
We become verified and voices in the market. Look, it does make sense. The only thing that you would ever need to worry about in that situation is what do you do with your business, you know? But if you've got a canny accountant, you know, they'd be able to sort that out for you. I mean, have we seen a lot more British buyers come? Not as many as I would expect, you know, but I guess it was only 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, the budget.
Yeah, or 2 weeks ago, actually, yeah.
A lot of people will be taking stock of that. How can I make it work? Okay, no, I have to leave. Or no, I can make it work. So we'll see. We'll see.
Why, out of interest, I mean, what is the most common reason you find a lot of Brits move to Dubai? Even in our segment of the market, which is obviously a bit more top end. What is that common denominator that you think, oh shit, I've heard that before?
I mean, it's a tax haven here. It's a tax haven. Standard of living is, I mean, it's all about the money.
Yeah.
It's a tax haven. The weather is amazing for 8 months a year. You know, it's all of the things that these hyperbole that are wheeled out day in, day out. Just because you hear them all the time, it doesn't mean they're not true. If anything, it means that they are even more so, right? And why would anybody want to live in this city? I mean, why did you come here? A better life, right? A better standard of living, a better life, better weather, better tax, better money, better everything. And why did you stay? I stayed because I looked around and was like, fucking hell, this place is amazing.
It's all right.
And I can make a real life here.
Yeah.
And that was 16 years ago when the marina was a load of roundabouts that were dust and gravel. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Like 16 years ago, the Al Khail Road was 2 lanes in either direction and a load of roundabouts. 4 lanes in either direction, a load of roundabouts. The marina, when you came in by what's the Grosvenor House, that was a huge gravel roundabout.
Yeah.
And the roundabout was just cones with string around it with a load of that tape that you see on it.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the JBR Walk was a car park.
It was just a fat beach, wasn't it?
No, it was a car park where people and then there were no shops open, not a single shop open on the ground floor of JBR. I'm that old.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm still here is because it's so much better here than Dubai, than the UK. And I say this to everybody who'll listen. The second my mates back in the UK tell me how brilliant it is to live there, I'm gone.
Yeah.
You know, I miss my family. You know, my wife misses her family.
Yeah, agreed.
But not so much as that we can't fly back and see them every year.
Yeah.
Because the lifestyle that we've built here affords you that opportunity.
Yeah.
You can fly back once, even twice a year, even 3 times a year to see them.
Yeah.
You can bring them out here. It's still not moving back. Like, it's still better being here, you know, staring down the barrel of, you know, 50,000 dirhams a year airfare. Like, it just makes no sense to be in the UK.
Do you think here is a playground for the rich and famous, or do you think that?
I think it was. I think it's becoming more of a residential option for the rich and famous.
So even somebody listening to this that maybe hasn't got to where they want to in life, or aren't part of that mass affluent kind of group that we're talking about, Dubai is still a real living proposition for them to consider.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's how the city is going to move forward.
True.
Is by people coming here, intelligent people, setting up businesses, creating job opportunities, creating population growth. That's what this city is geared up to do, is to get people to come here, set up businesses and grow the city in terms of populace, in terms of GDP, in terms of global eyes on the city. That's the game plan. All right, so we've got a couple of minutes left, so a bit of a change of pace. We are going to talk about my favourite mop head politician and probably yours, Mr. Trumpelstiltskin, and his new election to the throne of the US political sphere. I don't know where I went with
America
that,
great again.
And is he going to make America great again? I mean, we've just seen the dollar soar in value.
Yeah.
I mean, soar. But again, I'm stealing all of the chat from you at the moment, but I always thought that Donald Trump wanted a weak dollar because it makes it better to trade with a country where the currency is weak. So his first act has really shafted him because the value of the dollar has just gone through the roof.
It's gone through the roof, yeah.
What do you feel about it? What do you think the general consensus in this part of the world is about Mr. Trump being in charge?
We are, I guess, in some respects by design, because that's kind of how the UAE's positioned itself. But we are
pegged to the dollar, right?
We're pegged to the dollar, but we're not just a tax haven of sorts. We're kind of a safe haven in terms of geopolitical storms that are happening around the world. I think definitely among my client base, and what I feel is that if Harris had won, it would have been bad for the world, but good for the UAE, because a lot of these issues would have just been prolonged. The can kicked down the road. I think the feeling generally is that Trump is maybe not as good for the UAE because we can't capitalize maybe on some of the
war is good for war in the region is good for the market.
I'll let somebody clip that and you say it.
No one needs to look to read between the lines here. You're saying that, and it's true.
Yeah,
right. When Russia and Ukraine are having their issues, the UAE benefited. Iraq, Afghanistan, we had a lot of people flee the war zone and they came here.
Syrians, absolutely. So I think from that perspective, it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, his whole thing of, we'll end the conflict within 24 hours of me going into office. We'll see if that rings true. I think it's going to be a bit more complicated than that.
Oh, no, he hasn't been sworn in yet.
No, he's not been sworn in yet. Yeah, so I think he'll have a bit of work to do there. But generally, if we get a world where America is thriving, it tends to sort of, what was that old saying we had in finance? When America when America sneezes, the whole world catches a cold.
Yeah.
And I think it is very much that. If we get to a point where...
disgusting analogy. I just imagine snot flying across the world.
But if people are thriving off the back of this globally because of America being great again, then there should be more money to play with and everybody should thrive in a capitalistic society.
A more harmonious world awaits us.
A more harmonious world awaits us. And obviously, if we've got a currency that is pegged to the dollar and the dollar continues to soar, if you as a client or an individual are buying assets here, then not only is the value of that asset going up, but potentially the currency that it's denominated in as well. So it is a very interesting investment play.
But it's suddenly become about 5% more expensive to buy it here.
Absolutely.
If you're bringing your money from pounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I don't know about
Not
you.
Not 5%. What am I talking about? Like 0.5%. Anyway, whatever.
Maybe think of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Love Bitcoin right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you feel about it? Because, I mean, it felt to me like the world just needed a bit of a shake-up.
It did feel a bit like the world breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
And then you go on your social medias and there's purple-haired Americans crying and screaming into the camera going, why? Yeah. I don't know. I guess time will tell. I think he will. I mean, the relationship between the US and Russia was never so tight as it was when he was in charge. And I believe that the rest of the world see Mr. Trump as a man who will take necessary steps, whereas the people who are in charge before, more than happy to just go to war, and war is very good for business apparently, but it's only really good for a few businesses, not for everyone. Whereas I think Donald Trump understands business far better than most. Weird to say that, and he understands that if you want a country to benefit, you have to do things that are good for all of them, right? And going to war costs taxpayer money, which isn't going back into the country, and it only benefits a few people, exponentially so. And that's why you saw all of these, the previous people who were in charge in the US owning shares in military weapons companies and defense and all of these things. They knew to buy in at the right time. So it genuinely felt like a lot of people just breathed a sigh of relief because were still are very close to potentially being a war in Iran or with Iran, and if that can de-escalate, that makes everyone a little bit nervous, right? War between the US and Iran, I mean, that's brown pants kind of moment there, right? You don't want that to happen. You especially don't want that to happen on the doorstep of the UAE. So, I think in that respect, an all-out war with Iran would have been very dicey for the UAE. And now it potentially looks like that won't happen. Good news for us.
So to summarize, move here, buy here, come and have fun here.
All of that.
Don't pay tax here.
I would say, do you know what? If I was to say to anybody thinking about moving here, I would say to them, do what I did. Come for a year and a half and see. And if you don't like it, no harm, no foul. If you do like it, put down roots. Don't listen to what people tell you. Do something about it and experience it for yourself.
Seems like the perfect note to end on.
Good night. Listen, guys, thank you very much for joining us. I have been Barney. We have been Eden Real Estate. This has been
Ray Verma.
See you again next time. And welcome. Thanks for watching the first ever Eden Realty podcast. There may be more, there may not. So stay tuned.